Hey, so maybe you could start by introducing quickly yourself and your project, and to describe quickly what is your project and then what it does, and then I will have a bunch of questions for you guys.
Okay. So I'm Louis. I'm facilitator for the core unit, the StarkNet engineering core unit at MakerDAO. So our mandate is to high-level rebuild Maker on StarkNet. We're taking a few steps before that that are involving bridges and what we call wormhole or teleport, which would give us fast withdrawal and easy teleportation from layer 2s to layer 2s.
I'm Oscar. I'm building Empiric. Empiric Network is the sort of the first and leading oracle on StarkNet. And so what we're thinking about is what does data on ZK rollups actually look like? What do price feeds or data feeds look like? And how do they change when you get on-chain computation? Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ernesto. I'm from Aave. Like I was mentioning before, I was the CTO on the Aave companies. Now I co-founded this initiative called BGP Labs, and we are core contributors to the protocol. And well, in what relates to StarkNet, I'm also like facilitator, but in this case, like of the Aave ecosystem to basically have a full deployment of Aave in StarkNet in the future. And the same as with Maker, like we are also doing like some steps previously, like to involving also bridge and to understand how to go with the full, let's say, migration or like deployment there. Yeah.
Okay, so my first question will be about the barrier to entry regarding Cairo, and how did you approach that with your team? What were the main challenges you faced regarding the decision process? And yeah, I'm curious about that regarding the decision process of the migration.
At Maker, the StarkNet engineering team is a core unit. I would say its counterpart is the protocol engineering core unit of Maker, which has built and is operating the protocol. We decided to have a separate core unit because we understood that there was a learning curve to learn in Cairo. There was also an opportunity to investigate what new could we do now that things are faster and cheaper. There was also, in all transparency, it was more clean cut to do it like this from a budgeting standpoint. What it's going to look like in the future, we're basically investigating it. For the phase where we are building on StarkNet, it makes a ton of sense to have a separate core unit. In terms of operation, to your point that you made before the panel, it feels more natural to have one core unit owning the governance logic and the business logic. And so will it be like this in 2 years? Maybe, maybe not.
Okay. Ernesto, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, our case in Aave is, I would say, kind of similar to Maker, but also a bit different. We are like the team that is working like on the Cairo implementation of the Aave ecosystem. At the moment, it's quite separated, but separated doesn't mean like core team separated, because right now basically there is not really a core team, and we don't have really core units in the case of Aave. So what we did initially was like try to form a team like from people that was external to Aave, and still keeping like basically on my side, and then some other people that was involved for a long time on the Aave side, more like as guides on what is good for Aave and like what it makes sense. But for example, in my case, I was not really an expert on Cairo. I'm more expert on the EVM and Solidity side, and yeah, like the implementation is again getting done by other people that is enter as community members. So yeah, that is how we tackle this.
Okay, interesting. Is it your first non-EVM chain?
L2. Yeah.
Or even L1.
Maker is on Optimism and Arbitrum. So we started that a few months before StarkNet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in our case is kind of the same. Like non-EVM is the first. Everything else was kind of solid.
Yeah. I am curious about the challenges regarding the state of the infrastructure, maybe like 6 months ago on StarkNet, and what has changed since. And can you give us a bit more information about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you 6 months ago, for example, there wasn't a good Oracle, and now there is. No, but I mean, I think 6 months ago, I mean, the ecosystem was just in a different state, right? Things were early. I think now you just see sort of, I mean, obviously now there's really good data infrastructure, and now you can get price feeds and all of that. But also education, right, is much better now. Only Dust obviously is doing great stuff there. You have great wallets. I think, in a way, those infrastructure projects, it was quite important that they started pretty early. I remember when we started, everyone was like, "Well, isn't like StarkNet way too early? Shouldn't you wait like half a year or something?" But really, I think the infrastructure phase started like a quarter or two ago, because the infrastructure needs to be ready before everyone else starts building. Because if you don't have like reliable price feeds in our case, or like a good wallet or whatever, you guys can try to come over, but it's not gonna, you'll have to build everything from scratch. So I think now we're actually in a pretty good position where I think the ecosystem invites anyone, not just the blue chips, to come over, because now it's like, anything is possible. Like, we have all the building blocks that you need.
Yeah, building those primitives are very important, and those are the foundation for more complex DeFi project or even non-DeFi. I have a question, because to me, I always say that regarding the fact that we are not EVM compatible, and the fact that also means that we are not limited by the EVM. Do you already foresee some features that are possible in Cairo and impossible or very complex to do with the EVM?
So obviously Maker is the beauty of a DAO. So that's kind of my opinion, but I'm trying to surface the discussions that we've had. Obviously, you have improvement in speed and cost. So you can think of improving the protocol in that way. Currently, we have a 1 hour delay on the oracles. Arguably, you could use a higher speed to go tackle another type of market segment that's going to be landing at shorter frequencies. Where there are thoughts around potentially having the governance on StarkNet. It's probably not something that's going to happen in the next year, but it's definitely something that we've been talking about. For us, unlike Aave, we don't have yet cross-collateralization, so vaults are single asset. So when we're thinking about, how can we take this opportunity to explore new features that could improve the protocol, cross-collateralization is definitely on the list and on top of the list.
Yeah, to me, L1, L2 messaging is a very great feature that will enable a bunch of use cases. Yeah.
The last one is Oracle, but I will let you take it.
Well, I also wanted to say, what a great framing. Like, okay, it's non-EVM, yeah, but I think that's exactly the way to think about it, right? Like, you don't want to build the same thing all over again. You want to enable new things. And so one of the sort of the exciting things about what we're doing is whenever people want to come over from the L1, they start talking to us sort of early before they start building and so on. And then in those conversations, it's always very interesting to hear from them, like, how are you going to come over? Is it going to be the same as on the L1? Like, what is going to change? And so in the conversations that we're having, the big thing that you see is, data feeds just look like you get the ability to do computational data feeds. Right. And one thing that is massively important to anyone who's doing collateral is, let's do like a volatility feed, right? Like how volatile is the collateral that you're dealing with, right? Or if you do multi-collateralization, what is the correlation between those asset pairs or those asset groups that you're actually taking in, right? And like, can you have certain pairs that are actually much better? And so that is contributing to solving one of the core, of course, challenges, which is the capital efficiency that you have. On top of that, of course, faster updates and all of that comes also into the mix. But so that's, I think, that is going to be a very, very interesting thing that we'll be seeing from blue chip protocols. Like, how much will you actually be innovating, right? Like, how bold will you be? I think there's huge opportunity costs actually to not doing it, right? Because there is the possibility that this will actually be one of the major environments. And so if you don't add these new features, if someone else goes and innovates first, you might actually lose a lot of market share. Like, not a lot of teams have that same problem. I think like blue chip protocols, they tend to want to have the experience just stay the same. And you're very careful with the new features and so on. So I think it's going to be interesting. We've seen that, like, these conversations play out in interesting ways. Yeah. But we hope that people are bold. They try new things because it's a completely new environment. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so beyond blue chip protocol, if we're looking at the case of computational oracles, basically all of a sudden it means that you can manage your risk in very different ways. Yeah. And so either you improve your risk or you do things that were just not doable before. So could expect from that new breeds of AMM on perps exchanges that need to, like, any exchange or application that has risk management at the core of its business, basically, there is a new vertical or new applications that will come from that.
And what about you, Ernesto? Did you explore some new features, or you focus only on having parity feature with your EVM version?
Well, I think I'm not fully sure if I agree with this point of view of, say, like EVM, non-EVM compatible, because obviously, like Cairo is not Solidity, it's not Viper, and the underlying technology is not EVM. But there was a huge effort, and there is a huge effort, like on StarkNet, to make pattern compatible of EVM. From my point of view, and this was a bit different like 6 months ago. But now, when I see the state of art of StarkNet and Cairo, basically the patterns are kind of similar. So for me, there is not really overhead. It's just different syntax and not so much more. So in that sense, I think that it's kind of compatible with EVM. And then in terms of the features and things that can be explored, what was mentioned already, about risk, for example, and which mainly is about oracles and other types of oracles, is quite straightforward to understand. But I will point out about that in Solidity and in DBM, sometimes we are aware, when you are deeply developing in a core big protocol, we are aware that certain small optimizations could create huge change, by introducing certain optimizations in the code base. Both on how you consume the data, what you can do risk-wise, what you can do in terms of features. So probably I see something on that direction. When everybody from L1 will start to think about those small limitations that can unlock a lot of features on top. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if you guys are trying to contribute more broadly to the ecosystem, beside just building your Cairo version. For example, we talked about standardization, for example, and you guys have a lot of experience on Ethereum, and I was wondering if you also try to help the community and help on the standardization effort, or any kind of stuff to contribute more broadly to the ecosystem.
We definitely work with a lot with the ecosystem. I think it's been a lot of discussion, a lot of feedback has come, and what's been incredible is to see StarkNet basically just taking this feedback very close to heart, and basically either fixing or coming up with solution. One example is for Maker, basically the ability for users to be able to withdraw their funds safely at any point in time was extremely important. Originally, you can, with a single sequencer setup, you can always get censored by the sequencer. We know that there is a midterm plan that's going to come soon to solve that. So feedback was taken, and I'm assuming that Ave's team also gave that feedback. But short term, we had to come up with an escape hatch, which was a completely ad hoc process. We worked with them to come up with it. The other, I would say, topic we are involved in, StarkNet financed or helps some teams that are working on formal verification, which we're very, very interested in, because that's what will give really like the stamp of approval on what we're doing. So definitely a lot of collaboration, and I would say it's also our duty as a StarkNet core unit to provide that feedback and work with the ecosystem to make it better.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, it's quite similar. Like I would say that's something to take into account is that the team that is actually developing Aave on StarkNet is partially, at least half of the team, like is of Nethermind team, which are experts in Cairo. So like by default, like we are quite involved, like Aave on StarkNet in the Cairo and StarkNet ecosystem. But another point is that when you need to port like a system like Aave, which is like decently complex, I would say, at the end, we are already finding that certain infrastructure of code, like smart contracts on L1 that we use like from other providers like OpenZeppelin or like some other standards is not yet available on Cairo, or it's available in a bit different way. So like it's kind of impossible like to at the end like keep contributing like and giving back to the rest of the ecosystem. Now, for example, we will enter soon in the second phase of Aave on StarkNet, which will be like the implementation of the pool themselves, and we will need to get really involved like in the parts of the UI and backend integration, on which I expect that there is going to be a lot of work, because we want to have everything really well unified between EVM and non-EVM chain.
Okay. I would like us to try to compare the different approaches to tackle the migration of a project from Ethereum to StarkNet. We can see two different approaches. One is to internalize this process in the existing team, or to externalize that to another team, or maybe there are also other approaches, but can we try to compare the different approaches? And did you explore those different alternatives? And what are the advantages and drawbacks of each approach?
So as I said, we're a core unit at Maker taking care of that. Again, the reason was there is a learning period, and it's not just about Cairo. It's really understanding the trust assumption and basically openly giving the feedback from Maker protocol engineering team and our core unit about the trust assumption, and just provide this data to the Starkware StarkNet team. We have a lot of thinking currently in terms of operations. So say fast forward, we're going to have the full Vault engine on StarkNet. What does it mean for operation? What does it mean when we add an asset? What does it mean when we need to change the risk parameters of those assets? Do they even need to be the same on StarkNet? And so we had a lot of discussions around basically like strategic operations and wondering if the StarkNet engineering core unit, when we're, I would say, quote unquote, done with the job, should be merged or should stay independent, and why. And I don't think we don't have a full conclusion to that yet. But we spent the entirety of last week all together talking about this. So definitely a lot of discussions about that.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, I will say that I've expanded quite early to other chains. So like there was already like quite let's say holistic approach on how to work when you go to another network. So I think in the case of StarkNet, it's more about like the initial, let's say, heavy lifting, and because obviously like the network is still in a bootstrapping phase. So because of that, like we believe that it was better just to create like an independent team, an independent effort, which phase one was mainly experimentation, I would say. And then later on, I mean, ideally, I would say that there is not only one team, but that any team that wants to support like the development of Aave in general for them, it should be the same. Like, because the main architecture of like the Aave protocol on StarkNet and on other networks should be kind of the same, of course, like with the specifics of, like Louis mentioned, like with the risk management and maybe some extra features. But the general idea most probably will be the same. So I would say that it will be common.
Okay. And do you think that at some point where the community of developers becomes more mature, we could explore some solution with fully externalized contributors that will tackle the migration of existing projects? Do you think that could be a viable option? And maybe exploring the different ways of funding those contributions through the governance of StarkNet, stuff like that?
Totally. I think it depends a lot of which protocol you're talking about and what's the governance structure. At Maker, there would definitely be some challenges, or I would say some fair pushback from the community, because if you do that, you need to assure that the design and the implementation is fully aligned with what the protocol engineering team did on L1, and that you have enough close collaboration to assure that the migration is actually a successful migration. But I would say then, if you have a blue chip protocol that is trying to build an ecosystem of Builder on top of itself, this ecosystem of Builder could definitely flourish much faster on StarkNet, because I think the conditions are here and the talent is here.
Yeah, I think one thing, just sort of as a more general point, like when blue chip protocols think through whether they want to move onto StarkNet, it's always like a cost question. Okay, like we don't have the expertise, like how long is it going to take us and so on. I think, first of all, as I said in the beginning, I think the opportunity cost of not moving is actually incredibly high. And then the cost of actually moving over is, I think, much lower than people think. For example, we've seen it with StarkSwap and Yearn. Like there's a lot of teams in the ecosystem that are extremely high talent, super good, that'd be super willing to partner with like another protocol, right? Like that sits in a different environment and like build out like a first, version of whatever they're trying to build. So I think there are many, many different ways in which people can come over, and I think that's really important to realize for these people as they're making that calculation, right? Like, is that worth it? Is it worth it to invest here?
I think it will be extremely important to use your feedback because you are somehow paving the way for other projects to come, and I will be happy to talk with you in more details about what you learned, and I think if we can document that, and that will definitely help future projects to migrate on StarkNet. I have a question regarding maybe the timeline, especially in the decentralization process regarding, but basically, do you first ask your community if the move to StarkNet will be interested, or do you first try to have a kind of a proof of concept to make sure that it could be doable first, or usually how do you deal with that and the decentralized governance aspect?
I mean, in Maker's case, it's kind of a binary decision. Do we do it or not? Someone needs to, we put forward a plan to do it. The main concern of the governance is basically risk management. So good example, we have limits on the bridge currently. Bridge is full. We haven't increased yet. We need to go through governance again. We have a limit on a debt ceiling that's dedicated to fast withdrawal. And that's how you appease governance. I would say the two things that governance is looking at currently, it's around the case of like as I mentioned earlier, the ability for the user to withdraw on L1 whatever the condition of the L2. And it's also around the trust assumptions of the fast withdrawal, which should be solved with the new features that are going to come in the next 6 months and with decentralization. So we think timeline-wise, we're building the protocol, fast withdrawal, teleport, full vault engine. We're going to have risk parameters and sailings until I would say at least mid-23, end of 23. And once some additional feature are here and decentralization is coming, you can expect those ceilings to go way up or disappear.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, like the process is quite binary, I will say. Maybe just a bit different. Like I can put the example of phase one. I personally, like as community member, like made like a plan of how it would look for me. Then the community say makes sense, and then like some budget and was presented and it was approved. So obviously at that point there is a bit of a compromise already, like to go forward. It's divided in phases. So at the end, like the community could actually say, now we don't think it's worth it to continue with this, so we can stop. But most probably it should not happen, like because there is not really good rationale for it. So like in terms of timeline, we are thinking that maybe it depends a lot because we also depend in infrastructure. So even if we can implement our protocol like in StarkNet, definitely like during this year, we cannot assure that it's going to be fully deployed this year because, for example, we depend on Oracle infrastructure. So yeah, like ideally during this year we should be in StarkNet with the full protocol, and also helps that we have quite a lot of like protections risk-wise of how to list assets, for example, like on the protocol itself, to be sure that nothing like blows out. So yeah.
Okay, so we talked a lot about the difficulties around building. I was wondering about the adoption of your user base actually, and how you plan to do that, and will you try to remain neutral, or will you try to incentivize your user base to move to StarkNet? Okay, last question, Sam. Okay.
Is your question, are we going to be biased L2-wise? Yeah. Is that the question? Yeah. So, I mean, this specific effort is led by the growth team in collaboration with ourselves and the protocol engineering core unit. I mean, for us, the goal is to make DAI the most used stablecoin. So I would say it requires a playbook that we're writing on that, frankly, we didn't get fully right so far on different L2s. So I would say this process that we are coming up with to bootstrap liquidity and enable liquidity in a capital efficient way is the same across all the L2s. Are there going to be some StarkNet specific approach? Yes. I can't fully disclose all of that now because, I mean, partly those are very internal discussions, and those are also like thoughts that are pretty early, if I'm honest.